Hey, gang, welcome to the latest episode of Life Served Neat. Today, we're going to talk about Lake Norman. The lake spans 4 counties and supplies drinking water to a large portion of the greater Charlotte region. With more than 520 miles of shoreline, Lake Norman is the largest man made lake in North Carolina and one of the most heavily used recreational lakes in the Southeast. Today, we're joined in studio by men who've been doing some great work protecting Lake Norman. They are with the Lake Norman Wildlife chapter of North Carolina Federation, an organization focused on protecting and improving the natural resources that make Lake Norman a destination for residents, visitors, and wildlife. Our first guest is Dave Myers, chapter secretary and board member of Lake Norman Wildlife. Dave also serves as chairman of the board and former president of Jim Myers and Sons, a company with decades of experience in municipal water and wastewater treatment. His professional background gives him a unique perspective on water quality and environmental stewardship. After years of supporting conservation efforts, Dave became actively involved with Lake Norman Wildlife through fish and habitat restoration projects. Now he helps guide the organization's mission and growth. Joining him is my friend and neighbor, Connor Reynolds, a member of Lake Norman Wildlife Leadership and one of the organization's most active volunteer coordinators. Connor has helped lead a wide range of hands-on conservation initiatives around Lake Norman, including island habitat restoration, shoreline stabilization projects by adding native plantings, and community volunteer efforts that bring together residents who want to make a tangible difference on the lake. Together, Dave and Connor represent both the strategic and the hands-on side of conservation. We'll discuss the health of Lake Norman, the environmental challenges facing the region, community response following Hurricane Helene, and wildlife restoration efforts and what residents can do to help the lake for future generations. Connor, Dave, welcome to Life Served Neat.
Thank you for that kind introduction.
Thank you, Howie.
Dave, you've spent much of your career working around water and wastewater infrastructure. How did you become involved with the Lake Norman Wildlife Federation and the Lake Norman Wildlife?
Well, Howie, it goes back a long ways, back to the mid-'60s. My family and I started tent camping on Lake Norman, and I was putting around in my little John boat and picking up trash, helping wildlife in distress, and didn't realize that I was helping North Carolina Wildlife Federation. It just seemed like the right thing to do. That carried forward for a decade through the birth and raising of my 2 sons, as well as the birth and currently raising of my 2 grandsons. They all like to come out and enjoy the water and have fun cleaning up as well.
That's a really great way to get started. Connor, you spent countless hours organizing projects and volunteers all around the lake. You're a hunter, you're a fisherman, you're an outdoorsman. Was there a specific moment when you realized this was going to be more than just interest?
I moved to Lake Norman in 2020, and I started learning more about the opportunities from a fishing perspective. It was endless opportunities with the largemouth bass, the spotted bass, the hybrid bass, the striped bass, and even the brim that we get off our docks. I think it's just a very unique ecosystem above water and also below water, which we work to protect each day.
For people that are new to the area, what makes Lake Norman worth protecting to begin with?
I would start with, what do we use the lake for? The lake is clean water, and it's been clean for many, many years. And there's 4 main intake areas. You've got Mecklenburg, you've got 2 in Mooresville, and then you've got 1 in Lincoln. I think that's something we can start with, and that's worth protecting. Obviously, all the other animals that live and thrive around the lake, they need that clean water as well. And so if you think about the osprey, they have to have that clean water to be able to survive and stay around. So I think it's critical. One of the big pieces of the lake is just to maintain the cleanliness of the water for the natural resources.
We'll talk about Helene in a little bit, but that was quite a bit of cleanup that had to take place. Dave, most people see a beautiful lake, expensive homes, recreational boating. From your perspective, what's the current health of Lake Norman?
I believe the current health is good and getting better, and that is coming from public awareness, public education, and some of the restrictions that we all have to deal with. They seem a bit challenging for us as lake dwellers to deal with, but the long term positive effects of those regulations are very helpful. How, as you'd mentioned in the intro, I was involved with municipal water and wastewater throughout North America for 40 years. And the American public, and we can whittle it down to the Lake Norman public, sometimes fails to realize that it is a finite natural resource, that we need to take care of this natural resource because it's not infinite and we have a source and it's our responsibility to be stewards of the lake.
Where is the public perception accurate, and where do people misunderstand what's actually happening on the lake?
A couple of viewpoints that come to mind. One, folks could view it as accessible for only the rich and well to do. There are so many public launches that anyone can get out and enjoy the lake. It is crowded during the summer, um, but the public perception, I believe that it can be dirty because the Catawba River, which feeds 11 lakes throughout its chain, has wastewater discharge into it and water drawn from it, but that is effectively the cycle of life. That wastewater discharge is treated far more stringently than the old septic fields and runoff of yesteryear. So we think with that regulation, the quality is improving.
With your professional background, are there trends involving water quality or growth or the infrastructure of the lake that concern you?
There are. It's the development of effectively every square inch of shoreline, both those that I recognize growing up here for so long as developable, but some that I was quite surprised that they were able to develop. It's disturbing the shoreline, the runoff of silt and sediment and chemicals into the lake from that construction is showing some effects on the lake.
I know exactly what you're talking about. I see it being here on the lake for the last 6 years. You see it all the time. When you think about Lake Norman in 10 or 20 years, what concerns you the most? Is it development?
I would say development is something that we wanna keep an eye on. As you get further north, you start to see more shoreline that's not developed. So you've got Lake Norman State Park. As you get up into the river system, you actually start to see horse farms and you see pastures that are not developed. And I think that's one of the beauties of the lake. And I think that's something that we should look to our municipalities to potential land purchases to protect that because once it's developed, once it's turned into either homes or apartments or any type of commercial use, it's very difficult to get back, and so I would just say that's one strategic area of focus, which is just protecting of undeveloped land.
We spoke a little bit about Lake Norman and the pressures on it. Why don't you tell me about the mission of Lake Norman Wildlife?
Lake Norman Wildlife was chartered in 2008 and is a community based organization whose mission is to protect, conserve, and restore wildlife and habitat of the Lake Norman area. We also feel part of our responsibility is the educational resources that we can offer to our future generations. We just finished up a 6 week program under the name of Young Explorers. We do community outreach coupled with the cleanup efforts.
And from where it first began, how it was chartered to what it looks like today, can you explain that evolution a little bit?
This was before my official time with the chapter, but it originally started by local lake dwellers adopting islands, just wanting to keep them clean. And in 2008, North Carolina Wildlife Federation started a chapter program, and Lake Norman Wildlife was one of the first three that were chartered as a individual chapter of the federation. And then Connor can explain how that program has evolved.
Connor, let's talk about the Island Habitat Program and the role it played in the organization's foundation.
The Island Habitat Program is sponsored by NCWF and Duke Energy to provide partnerships that will help keep Lake Norman Islands clean of litter and enhance public awareness. And so the program is designed to encourage clubs, groups, boating clubs, homeowners associations, just homeowners in general to adopt an island. And what the groups agree to do is clean up debris from the island while providing data on the wildlife species that occupy the island. And so this partnership, like I said earlier, is part of NCWF, but also Duke Energy is the manager of the resource. We work closely with Duke Energy, and we have various working agreements where we can work together on allowing folks to adopt an island. And Dave, I believe there's over 100 islands to adopt.
92.
92. So we're
92.
at 92 right now. And these islands are all in the 4 different counties that we talked about earlier. The way that we've designed the program for LNW is there's a coordinator assigned to each county. What that helps with is not only organization within LNW, but also organization within the community. You'll see the groupings of the islands. We actually have a map on our website that I'd like to, share here with you all. And that is an interactive live map where it has a number assigned with the islands. Not every island has a name. However, we do have a number from 1 to 92. You can see that on an interactive map. There's certain islands that have no human access to them. Heron Island, which is for herons that are nesting, and there's signs up that you're not supposed to be on that island. And so you have certain islands that are on the lake that you don't see many people going to. One of our big partners is Skipper's Landing, which is part of Safe Harbor Marina. And while they're out and they're monitoring their boat fleet and their customers, they can also contribute by cleaning up. They've adopted a handful of islands on the north side, and that's where you can see a really good partnership and adopters adopting these islands up all along the lake.
Beth and I have adopted 2 islands officially for 2 years now. We've been cleaning one of them up for 4 or 5 years since we got on the lake. I didn't know about Lake Norman Wildlife when we first got here. We just kind of always picked up, cleaned up as we were leaving. And I was always disappointed to see how much trash was left behind from people that came to visit. So it just seemed like the right thing to do to pick it up. And then when Connor became our neighbor and Lake Norman Wildlife became a topic of discussion, we've been coming to meetings, and 2 years now we've adopted Painted Tree and a little island that the eagles nest off of in right near Dog Island. If you ever get a chance to go to Heron Island, Beth and I have packed up and gone over for breakfast, just kind of anchored off. The chatter when they're nesting and to see all the activity is really cool. You can't go to it, but if you go watch it, it's exciting to just anchor nearby.
Yep, and I mentioned earlier there's 92 islands, 72 of those are adoptable.
Howie, you had mentioned Heron Island. There's a great video clip from WSOC in 2020. Lake Norman Wildlife funded the shore restoration of Heron Island because it was eroding so bad just to preserve that rookery.
What project are you most proud of?
I always go back to the Christmas tree drop. And the Christmas tree drop is where we partner with the Lake Norman Freemasons, and they've got the Shriners Club. For record, it's Lake Norman Shriners Club.
Correct.
And they raise money for the Children's Hospital. What happens is every Christmas, folks buy Christmas trees, and after Christmas, contact the Shriners to get those picked up. And there's a donation fee associated with them picking up the Christmas trees. And so the Shriners will receive the donation, and then the folks that have the tree get rid of it in a way that it can be recycled back to the lake. I believe last year
$5,000 to $6,000, I
Wow.
believe.
$5,000 to $6,000. Then the trees go to Safe Harbor Skippers Marina, where they stay there for storage. They stay until March when the dredging season is over. Mark Lancaster, which is Lancaster Docks, allows us to use his barge. And then we bring those over to a designated spot that have been permitted by Duke. Once these trees land on the bottom of the lake, anchored down by cement blocks, they create a habitat that was not there before and is very difficult to create in a man-made lake like Lake Norman.
The small fish hide within the branches.
That's right. It provides for those bait fish, which obviously brings the bigger fish. Not only does it create a habitat and an ecosystem underneath Lake Norman, which is, I would say, mostly bare.
It is.
And so then you allow that to happen. And then with those structures, you're able to, allow anglers to catch those fish that are living there.
Working with hundreds of volunteers, is there anything in specific that stands out?
I would just say most folks aren't aware of how amazing the lake is. Every time we go out on the lake, they always learn something new and they make a memory, whether it's friends or family or they meet new people. I think it's just a whole new experience. It always ends up being a very fulfilling experience of giving back.
A quick comment to your DIY listeners, and I'm sure there's a lot out there. Yeah, on the Christmas tree dropping your own Christmas tree in a safe depth and safe location is fine. But as Connor had mentioned, we may drop up to 300 Christmas trees, and it is a permitted activity that we do in a very structured manner in a agreed upon location. The water depth is safe. So support the Lake Norman wildlife by becoming active in our Christmas tree drop rather than dropping them in your own cove.
That makes sense, doesn't it?
Do you want to talk about the rock reefs that we put in over the years?
The bottom of Lake Norman is typically clay and flat and not a lot of debris. It was a lot of farmland when it was flooded in the 1958 to 63 time frame. So, in addition to the 7 years of Christmas tree drops, I think we've dropped over 2,500 trees collectively. We also do large rock reefs. Again, very strategically located. They have to be permitted at certain depth. Those above that certain depth have to be buoyed with safety buoys for boating traffic. And for the first time ever this year, Lake Norman Wildlife was issued a grant and will be dropping man-made 3D printed fish reefs at 2 locations on Lake Norman, and we're quite excited about that.
Connor, you had mentioned how people enjoy the lake and some don't appreciate just how fantastic a resource this is. I'll tell you, yesterday, Connor and I just happened to be at the same island, one that we clean up. And my granddaughter, who's 3, was playing with his 2 daughters. And I was sitting there watching the 3 girls walk down the sandbar and play in the water. The weather was perfect. It was really, how does it get better than this? It was just a moment that I'll remember for a while.
A comment that I'd like to make regarding that, and how do we determine that our efforts are successful? What we've done with the wildlife is things like you just described, the girls walking the beach. We had a clean and green cleanup a couple weeks ago where the Charlotte chapter of Women in Engineering volunteered for the second year to do a cleanup. And we went on a reconnaissance trip to check for trash on the islands, and we did not find much. Jokingly, we thought, are we going to have to plant some trash? And of course, we are not going to do that.
For a
But
photo op,
we did end up finding some trash on the islands, but the success of the program, the public awareness, is keeping the islands clean.
that's great to hear. If you don't have to clean as much because people are aware, that means the source is learning. Hey guys, tell me about your partnership network. How does that work with Lake Norman Wildlife?
It starts with North Carolina Wildlife Federations. Like we said earlier, we're a chapter of NCWF. From there, I would say our largest partner is Duke Energy, and Duke Energy manages the lake, and we work with them through the Island Habitat Program. We also work with them through permits to do conservation work, and also there's some grants that Duke Energy provides. I think those are the main three.
Duke Energy is a very regulated company and industry for good reason. They have a nuclear plant and hydro plants on the river chain. They've got to regulate what goes on in these lakes and islands. And we want to be that good corporate citizen and nonprofit organization that works with the rule.
Is it just financial, the partnerships? Is that why they're so important to Lake Norman wildlife?
It's permission and financial. Duke Energy has some responsibilities for the cleanliness and the recreational capabilities of Lake Norman. I can't speak specifically, but in their permit to maintain and manage that man-made reservoir, they have responsibility to the public. And Lake Norman Wildlife is one of their best advocates and partners to deliver those successes to the public.
You mentioned Duke, but who are some of your other partners?
Yeah, I mean, the local businesses around Lake Norman are critical for our organizations. Lancaster Docks supports and it provides the barge services as well as other equipment that's needed for pier rebuilds, rock reef construction, as well as the Christmas tree drop that we do every year. We also have all the marinas, Safe Harbor Marina, Skipper's Landing, Safe Harbor Marina, Kings Point, Safe Harbor Westport. All of those marinas have helped us over the years with either lending us a double decker pontoon for some of the work we've done in the past to sponsoring the Christmas tree drop or any other needs as they're strategically located around the lake. And then our two favorite breweries, got Lake Norman Brewery on the west side, and then we got 11 Lakes on the east side, and those breweries support events where we've had island adoption, we've had community members come in and learn more about the organization, and those breweries have just made it just more fun as well as engaging and lively. Dave, any more that I missed?
We do have special project sponsors such as Site One, who is and helping with some of the Helene cleanup. Ongoing sponsor, Lake Norman Sign Company, Purple Heart Homes, which is a unique nonprofit that is veteran run um, and will build and provide homes to veterans who need additional support. And they've partnered with us on some of our Christmas tree drops, as well as back in 2024 on Veterans Day, we had a celebration upon the expansion of Patriots Pier and the Rock Reef. We had ex-Governor Jim Martin speak. Purple Heart Homes was in attendance, so that was quite special.
You dedicated the pier.
Dedicated the pier. That's exactly right.
I remember seeing photos of that.
There's a number of other sponsors that help us. Blue Parrot comes to mind, and a number of others, but there's always room for more. So please reach out to us, to lnwc.org, and we'd love to engage you in some type of volunteer activity.
I see your sponsors or partners scrolling at the bottom of your website. If new sponsors want to begin a partnership, is that the best way through your website to connect with you there?
Yes, connect through info@lnwc.org, and that goes to one of our leadership members. We'll reach out, get an understanding of what kind of sponsorship you would like. All of them are custom, whether it's a product, a service, or a volunteer opportunity. We can deliver on any of the above.
The website is in the write-up of the website is in the summary of this podcast. I understand the town of Cornelius has been very important to Lake Norman Wildlife. Do you want to expand on that?
Would be remiss if we didn't mention the town of Cornelius, specifically the Parks and Rec department. They have been instrumental in some of our successes. We've partnered with them for the past 4 Earth Day events, Symphony in the Park, and the large Oktoberfest in the fall. We partner with them and those are open to the public and a great time had by all. We would like to engage other area municipalities to do the same thing. We recently had a table at the Davison Earth Day event, which was a step in the right direction.
Hurricane Helene was a major impact to North Carolina and the East Coast. Obviously, some areas were absolutely devastated. Many areas were affected. The lake and the lake system were heavily impacted. Can you tell me what the days after Hurricane Helene looked like?
Helene was overwhelming. I personally have family in Western North Carolina, so my first focus was to the west. But soon after that, we looked at Lake Norman, started getting reports from some of our membership as to floating docks, boathouses, etc. One of my colleagues, Billy Wilson, and I went on a couple of reconnaissance trips all the way up to Buffalo Shoals Bridge and beyond. And it was eye opening. It was just unbelievable the amount of destruction and debris, mainly on the north side of the lake, north of the 150 bridge. We joined forces with Duke Energy early on because of our relationship. We started a weekly call with Duke Energy, River Keepers, with Charlotte Water, Lake Norman Wildlife, and a couple other disciplines about what was needed to be done in the entire lake chain. Our focus was Lake Norman. We were the only wildlife chapter that was granted the responsibility of the entire lake cleanup and the guidance of that. We process all of our activities and gain approval from Duke Energy, but we were able to launch our first volunteer cleanup within 3 weeks after Helene, which I thought was quite impressive. We had people coming from all over the lake, all four counties wanting to help. And as is said so many times, there's a silver lining in everything. And I believe the silver lining that came out of Helene was the involvement of the community that turned into membership and the exposure that we got from doing the right thing. We had some news coverage, we had some radio coverage. Ultimately, we had three cleanups. The cleanup total debris was about 50 tons, about 100,000 pounds of debris that was cleaned up. And that was only man-made debris. We were instructed, unless it was a navigational hazard, to leave any natural woody debris there for wildlife purposes. We had the police departments out helping us, and volunteers came out of the woodwork, and it was quite impressive. The second cleanup effort was 3 weeks later, and then the third and final cleanup effort was pushing 6 to 8 weeks after Helene. And I'll never forget, I was captaining one of the Safe Harbor double decker boats with some volunteers on the boat just south of the 150 bridge, and got a call from the Mecklenburg County Police. They had found an entire floating dock that was 6 inches below the water. And this was 6 weeks after Helene. How did it not get found or create a catastrophe in that period of time? We don't know. But anyway, we tied up to it, we pulled it to an island, and our friend and partner, Lancaster Dock and Dredge, had their heavy equipment come out and pick up some of those large pieces. But it was just overwhelming and quite humbling that Mother Nature could have such a quick, significant impact on the lake.
How incredibly dangerous to have that dock underneath the water line. I captained a boat for a cleanup or two on the islands, and what impressed me was the billions of pieces of styrofoam that were in the lake, on the shore. It was just amazing. We cleaned up more 55-gallon drums than I knew was even somewhere near the lake, to never mind get in the lake and end up on these islands. I smile because of the absurdity of trash that was in the lake.
Yeah. If you think about the magnitude, you got docks that are floating down. What is an organization like LNW supposed to do? Who do we work with in order to get docks out of the lake, which is extremely time consuming? You have to have the right expertise, and it's also expensive to hire. Going back to partnerships, you got to work with partners. And so LNW needed to work with the right folks. So Lancaster Docks, Duke Energy had a couple contractors that were able to pull out not only docks, but big trees. Remember the trees that we saw? There was trees in the middle of channels. It's dangerous and it's a safety issue. We had to work with those partners in order to remove the heavy debris that were just wrecking kind
Yeah.
of the main channel.
To that point, more than once, we found just a single homeowner taking it upon themselves to go tie up to a tree and drag it to an island just for the safety of the public. And that is the silver lining that Helene brought to the lake.
It's nice to know there's still people out there that do things like that. How difficult was it to coordinate volunteers and equipment and boats and partner organizations to get the help on the lake? I know there was a lot in Western North Carolina that came from all over the nation, but how hard was it to drum support up here in Lake Norman?
The North Carolina Wildlife Federation, founded in 1945. They are very well structured, established registration programs and software. So it was instrumental for them to manage the registration and public notification of the need for volunteers. So that made things quite easy for us.
Yeah, we had, I think, over 600 volunteers for Hurricane Helene. That's what we tracked.
Would love to ask any of your listeners who may have participated, would love to hear stories of that and get it out in public, just because in today's times, the news is not always good, but it sure is refreshing to bring good news to the table.
I wish we had more good stories instead of always pointing out the negativity. People are copycats, so to copycat good is better than copycatting bad. You talked about the docks, you talked about individuals towing trees out of main channels. Are there any other stories that really stick out in your mind when you think back about Helene and the cleanup?
One of the items that pops in my head that was refreshing is the number of young folks. And when I say young folks, teenagers, because of the potential danger, we had to limit the age, but we had a number of high schoolers that just because, or it was a community contribution program within their school, how many of those were riding on our boat, lending a hand?
That's very encouraging to hear that about the generation coming up behind. My final question on Helene: what did the Helene experience teach you about the Lake Norman community? That they're willing to pitch in?
The community is resilient, and when tough times this, we respond. And you saw that it was a valiant effort by everyone to pitch in. They were asking, "How can we help?" We gave them a means to help, and I think the community was the big winner for the Helene cleanup.
I want to switch subjects really quickly here. Let's talk about the osprey nesting platforms. People see them all over the lake. Is there a backstory?
Yes, there is. We see the platforms all over the lake, and I think current count is 72 platforms, which is quite impressive, scattered all over the place. But they were giving the ospreys an alternate for nesting as opposed to the navigational channel markers, which, if you've been on the lake, you can see that it can be a bit of a safety concern if a big nest is hiding a signal light on a navigational sign. But the problem, and I'm reading from a marketing presentation that we present to the Golden Boys of Mooresville, the Davison Rotary Club, and some other folks. But regarding the osprey, the problem. Indiscriminate use of chemicals, DDT, and PCBs in the 70s and 80s led to compromised reproductive success, human interface. And I'm not a biologist. And one of our colleagues explained to me that the DDT and PCBs, they would soften the eggs to where the eggs would not make it to maturity and then hatch. And then the solution, chemical bans, nesting platforms, and public education. Similar programs were done with the blue heron. Osprey are more territorial and predators. The heron are communal in their nesting. That's why the rookery, Howie, you had mentioned Heron Island, but we're still providing them an alternate nesting location because the natural habitat is being developed.
I have a picture of an osprey nest on a channel marker. I took a picture of it, and it's hanging in the wife's office. She loves it.
I'll have to tell you a fun little story. So Billy Wilson and I were somewhat responsible to go assess how many navigational markers had osprey nest. And well outside of the nesting and egg laying season, to remove those nests from the navigational markers. We both struggled with that philosophically, but concluded we're doing the best thing. And the first time I was up eye to eye with an osprey nest, it was quite intimidating how large that guy was. But we felt good about doing that. The funny part of the story is Billy and I got creative to put some type of detractors to keep the osprey from building nests. We came back the following week, the nest was back. So it was wildlife 0, osprey 1. We did it a second week, failed again, wildlife 0, osprey 2. So the moral of the story, Mother Nature is going to win that battle. We just need to provide good alternatives.
Mother Nature is quite a competitor. Why are the ospreys such an important indicator species?
I think going back to what Dave was saying earlier about in the 1980s, the DDT being banned, that's definitely one. We don't want to contaminate the water because that could impact the eggs. But then also, as the lake stays healthy, as the fish population stays healthy, then the ospreys have plenty of food. And I've seen so many ospreys the last couple of weeks with full talons full of fish. And so I think that's just a testament to how resilient the ospreys have been, how clean the water is, and how I would say how healthy the fish population is on Lake Norman right now.
You have a live camera looking at an osprey nest?
Yeah, on our website, lnwc.org, there is a live camera which is placed right there on an osprey nest, and it's a great view of you can see the nest, you can see 3 babies inside, the mom's there, and you can see the water in the background, and so it's quite an experience to tune in.
It is one under the EarthCam program, which is an international program. I understand there may be 1,000 EarthCams globally and maybe 500 in the US or possibly more. When you go to the lnwc.org website, you can see the osprey, but you also see a link to the red wolf cam, which the North Carolina Wildlife Federation has a red wolf refuge in Columbia, North Carolina, which is 50 miles inland from the coast out in the middle of nowhere. But there's 2 cams, one in the red wolf's den and one in their preserve area. You won't see them quite as often as you see the osprey, but it's pretty unique to see them in the camera.
The red wolf, Columbia, is Outer Banks area, correct?
Correct.
I drove out there one time and I was surprised to see red wolf signs everywhere. We talked about the osprey needing clean water, healthy fish to thrive. Obviously, over the years, the ospreys are here, they're healthier, they're nesting, they have ample food. So it looks like it's a healthy ecosystem. Are there other wildlife indicators that we need to pay attention to? Are there other species that we can pay attention to besides the health of ospreys?
The general cleanliness in caring of the lake and surrounded areas will impact all wildlife species within and around the lake. The avid fishermen, the number of fishing tournaments on the lake these days, driven by the fish population and success of those various fish tournaments. You had made mention of the eagles around somewhere in your neck of the woods. I'm not sure if it's the same pair that we see because we're not far from your house. I understand they have like a 10-mile radius, but growing up since 65 on the lake, I just don't remember seeing the eagles around. I'm going to tell another little story. The lake was flooded with Cowan's Ford Dam, and it was completely filled in 1963. Prior to that was the Catawba River, which came down the main channel. There was Davison Creek, but there was bridges over the river. Of course, there's no bridges over the entire lake, but on Dickenburg Neck, which is the tip of Raleigh School Road, a young man in the 70s and 80s, we saw white squirrels. And I'm not sure if other listeners have seen those. And it was quite interesting. And we thought albino, and the answer was no. It is just a breed of squirrels. And the population is rather large in the area. A little research indicated that a large population is in Brevard, North Carolina, but that was quite interesting that the flooding of the lake captured that wildlife on the tip, and it has survived for that long. I saw a white squirrel within the last year.
I appreciate you guys being here today in studio. We are approaching the end, so I want to talk about community responsibility and the future of Lake Norman. What are the most common mistakes that you see boaters making on the lake, or that you know of boaters making on the lake?
There's so many that I see on a busy weekend that it's not yielding to the right of boaters as you approach them, whether it be ignorance or don't care about the others on the lake. It is not and should not be it's my lake and you're just on it mentality. It's a sheer natural resource that we all need to be able to enjoy. But we see trash coming out of boats. We see trash being left on the islands, even though it gives our island adopters something to do, but rather not have that much to do.
We always try and leave an island cleaner than we find it. If we see trash in the lake, we pick it up as we go by. I grew up on Long Island, so we were in the Great South Bay. Um, I've been around water my whole life, so it's just always come natural to me, maybe because that's how my grandfather taught me that this is what you do. It's always been that way. So it's shocking to me that people are on the water and don't respond the same way. If every Lake Norman resident adopted a habit or two or three tomorrow, what do you hope it would be?
We touched on the cleanup, and I think that's foundational. But also what we do at our houses, what we dispose of that hits the runoff, eventually leads into the lake. So I would advise folks just to pay attention to what you're disposing. And then lastly, I would say is just sharing something like educating someone younger than you. I think getting to the next generation is very important. So we have a unique opportunity to teach younger folks, and I've got 2 daughters, and instilling those values in them is very important, just to make sure that they understand why we're picking up trash, why we're being conscious of what we're disposing of, to ensure it doesn't negatively impact the lake.
Howie, I'd like to brag just a little bit. Connor and I are both pretty proud of it. Lake Norman Wildlife is one of 25 chapters within the state of North Carolina. And our mission is education, advocacy, grassroots mobilization, outdoor activities, and policy expertise. Lake Norman Wildlife was named the chapter of the year for the second time in 2025. And Connor and I, along with some of our colleagues, were up in Raleigh at the governor's award ceremony to accept that award. And we're quite proud of it, not for ourselves, but for the entire community.
What a wonderful way to be recognized.
Well, thank you. It was quite special, I think, for us, for the entire group. Everybody that attended had common values and common mission.
How can individuals, businesses, or organizations get involved? Perhaps it struck a chord with someone listening and they want their business to be involved, or they're able to allow business funding to come your way, or they want their business rolling on the bottom of your website. Community organization, maybe one person says, "Oh, I have 10 people, us 10 want to be involved." How do they get involved with Lake Norman Wildlife? Where's the best place to start?
Go to the website, lnwc.org. There's a contact tab on that site. You can also email info@lnwc.org, and that goes to several people, and just explain your interest. Or if your civic group or any type of group would like a presentation, we are always ready and willing to tell the Lake Norman wildlife story to anyone who will listen.
Dave, looking 5, 10 years ahead, what gives you optimism for the future of Lake Norman?
Well, this podcast is a prime example. It's educating the public. Who doesn't want a clean natural resource to recreate in? Whether you're boating or swimming or fishing, everybody wants it. And it's the public's responsibility to accept and help keep that area clean. So I'm more and more people will get engaged. Our Young Explorers program, hunters, young girls, those are the generations for tomorrow that if we set a good example instead of ritual, that ritual for stewardship will continue.
Both of you have countless hours, months, years working for the lake, working for the community. I want to thank you for all of your time. I know your wives are tolerant ladies that perhaps don't always like sharing you, but they always allow it to happen. I want to thank you for your investment in the community and in the lake. Connor, years from now, when your involvement is done, when you're finally hanging it up and you're just going to go fishing, what do you hope your contribution to Lake Norman and the community overall, what do you hope you leave behind?
Look at the health of the lake. I would love for that just to continue to thrive. And I think in the future, hanging my hat up, I would love to just sit back and enjoy seeing all that wildlife thrive here on the lake.
As we wrap up today's podcast, gentlemen, I want to thank you for being here. It's always great to have people in studio. I hope you like the Life Serve Neat World Headquarters. I want to give you an opportunity to plug your social channels or any upcoming events. So the mic is yours.
Let me start with lnwc.org, our website. We've had that URL for some time, but the website has been completely reconstructed and reformatted to a far more user-friendly platform. We are still in construction and keeping the calendar of events and upcoming event bios current on that site. Please visit when you can, and I commit to you that within the next month, that calendar will be updated. Connor can speak to some of the other social media platforms that we participate with.
I think one thing that would be great is we're trying to get all of our islands adopted right now. We have over 50% adopted so far out of 72. And so we've got more to adopt. So the call to action would be let's get all the islands adopted on Lake Norman. And then as a follow up to that, as you guys clean up, we love your photos and we can post those on our social media. So we've got Facebook, we've got Instagram. We can share those successes that you guys have had on the lake through our channels. And then also we have a reporting form. So as you clean up on lakes, let us know how much trash you picked up, what you found, what wildlife you saw on the island, and then anything else you want to report back. What that does is create an internal data set of what's going on these islands. We rely on you guys to provide that information. If it's not through social media, it's through that reporting.
A program I'd like to expand just a bit on. I had mentioned the term clean and green, and that references a North Carolina Wildlife Federation program. But for all of the individual island trash collection, as well as all the cumulative trash collected by the island adopters, hence the reason Connor mentioned we want to get all that recorded. But North Carolina Wildlife will donate a sapling tree for every 25 pounds of trash collected. Lake Norman Wildlife matches that. So for every 25 pounds of trash collected, there are 2 trees donated. Last fall, we planted 142 trees in various parks around the town of Cornelius. So that was quite a success.
Overall, 120 tons of trash removed since we started tracking, 1,600 button bushes planted, which are native plants to North Carolina that help with erosion, 183 bird nesting boxes and platforms installed on the islands. The statistics tell the story as a community in giving back to the lake.
Lake Norman Wildlife has website, has Facebook, and has Instagram. Those are the three channels that we're looking at.
That's right.
Are there any upcoming projects, cleanups? Or are they more off summer months?
We will have a tree planting in the fall. It's a bit more conducive to plant the trees. But we can put together a custom event for any group who would like, whether it be a presentation of wildlife or an actual volunteer in the field event, we can put that together. So please reach out to us.
Dave, Connor, I want to thank you for being here, for being on Life Serve Neat. We'll have you back again. Gang, thank you for tuning in. Thank you for listening. We'll see you next time.